What's up, everyone? It's Tech Trooper 64, and today is January 9th, 2015. And today is not necessarily about a news article, but it is about the PlayStation VR headset that Sony is planning for the PS4. Now, before I start about this, I would just like to say this is going to be a very long video. So, yeah, just please bear with me on this, and trust me, it'll be worth your time in the end. So anyway, this video will be called PlayStation VR versus Oculus Rift, because I think this is a comparison that people need to know before these headsets go out in the market, and then, come final minute, people want to know which one they should get. So I think we should start before we get into this. But I want to point out an article that's on GameSpot. I'll put it in the link description. There will be so many articles I'll put in the description. So, yeah, this one will be a GameSpot article that talks about how the CEO of Oculus, Lucky, adds about how he thinks that the PlayStation VR is not as high-end as the Oculus Rift. And here's what he had to say. Oh boy. Oculus Rift creator Palmer Luckey has spoken out to say that PlayStation VR isn't quite as high-end as Oculus Rift, although he does describe the device as a good headset. And then he continues on to say to IB Times that the PlayStation VR has a completely different atmosphere and market, and has more people in their audience because there's more PlayStation 4s that can be accessible to it and compatible with it. While with PCs, you have to buy a specific PC for it. And, we heard NVIDIA say it before, that there's only going to be 13 million PCs that will be available to be used with the Oculus Rift according to the specs. And this is what he said. That might be true, which about what he said about the PlayStation VR being Oculus Rift being biggest competitor. And he says, I don't think that there's a lot of people who already own a PS4 who don't own a gaming PC who aren't going to go out and make that roughly $1,500 all-in investment in the Rift. It is a really separate market. They're bringing virtual reality to a different group of people who I don't think are ever really a part of our market anyway. He goes on to say that it's also worth noting that their headset isn't as quite high-end as ours. I still think it's a good headset, and the PlayStation 4 is not as nearly as powerful as our recommended PC specs for a PC. The Oculus Rift requires a capable gaming PC, and PlayStation VR is powered by just the PS4 by itself, which is already in the homes of 36 million people worldwide. Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out there, that he thinks that the PS4 is not as high-end as the Oculus Rift. I think we put that to the test. So these specs might change, because these are specs that I got from the two Wikipedia pages from Oculus Rift and PlayStation VR. They might have changed. They might change in the future. I'm not sure, because these are all specs that we took from testing out from demos and stuff. Okay, so that's all I got for you, but we'll base it on that anyways. So we'll start with PlayStation VR because it's the one we don't know very much about. So the price, we don't know about how much it's going to be, but people have theories that it'll be floating around the price of $400 or $550, which that's personally okay with me, but I don't know, some people might think that's expensive. But anyway, so here we have that it uses an OLED display technology, and that it has 100 degrees of FOV, field of view, and it also has a resolution of 1920 by 1080, which is a native 1080p output. However, for each eye, it's outputting 960 by 1080 per eye to get that 1920 by 1080 display. So when you're using the PlayStation VR, I'm going to mix up the names on this, so just giving you a heads up. But when you're actually using it, because I do have a virtual reality headset here, it is the Google Cardboard. I mentioned that before. And when I use it, it feels like it's just one big screen in front of me, so you won't feel like that there's two screens. It's very similar to how the 3DS, it uses 3D and two images to actually just make one screen. So you won't see that one screen. What you'll be seeing is that native 1080p display in front of you. Next, it has a 120 hertz refresh rate, and the release date is set in Q1 or Q2 of 2016. Oh, but that's not all the information I have for you. The prototype revealed at GDC 2015 included an OLED display. We already talked about that, with an RGB subpixel matrix, and it also has a capability of displaying content at 120 frames per second, and has 6 DOF head tracking, stereoscopic 3D, and an unwarped output to TV, either for others to view what the headset wearer sees or a separate display to compete against the headset user using a standard PS4 controller. And that's all we know about the PlayStation VR. Now, let's switch to the Oculus Rift side of things, which things are somewhat looking a little bit better. Let's take a look. So the Oculus Rift is going to be coming out March 28th, 2016, and it'll be coming out Q2 of 2016 for the Oculus Touch, which people are very excited about, which I don't know why. It just looks really stupid when you're using it. But anyway, it's using also an OLED screen, very similar to the PlayStation VR, how it's using the same thing. The resolution is set at a 2160 by 1200, and you'll be getting a 1080 by 1200 display for each eye. Now, what's very unique about that number, 2160 by 1200, the first number is if I remember correctly, the first number is the height. That's the height of pixels of 4K. So that's just maybe floating around 3K, around that. So that's pretty impressive, considering that Sony's only giving you a native 1080p display, while Oculus is giving you a 3K or around 2K display. However, when one part gets powerful, they gotta cut somewhere else. The refresh rate, or in other words, the frame rate, is at around 90 hertz, or in other words, 90 frames a second. And the head tracking, it uses a 6 DOF, 3-axis rotational tracking with 3 minus plus axis positional tracking. Now the next thing is the weight. It's to be announced, but it says that it's going to be lighter than 380 grams. I'm pretty sure that's what it said. The platforms available will be Microsoft Windows, OS X, and Linux. Now, the next one I'm going to say is a little bit weird. The connection. It can use one HDMI 1.3, 3 USB 3.0s, one USB 2.0. And the price that they're asking for is $599.99. Wow. So looking at these two headsets right now, I don't know about you guys, but personally, I don't know. It's very, very tight. It's neck and neck almost. Because when you're buying the PlayStation VR, you're getting native 1080p. And that's good. And you're getting it at 120 frames per second, which is very good as well. But the thing is, no PlayStation 4 game exceeds 60 frames a second. Like, they're all capped at 60 frames a second. And sometimes they're not even capped. The games that are capped at 30 frames, they don't pass by 30 frames. They just stay at 30 frames or 60 frames, whatever they were developed to be. But that's what I'm trying to say. 120 frames per second, that's great that it can do that. But I was looking on PCs and all that. 120 frames a second looks almost identical to 60 frames a second. That's just my opinion, but that's what I can see, and it looks identical. Now, on the Oculus Rift side of things, you're getting the 2K display, or 3K, around that. And you're only getting 90 frames a second. Now, it's a little bit of a different story on PC, because it's weird that it says that it has an HDMI port, because it's like, if it has an HDMI port, well, does that imply that you can use it with any console or system at all? And I don't know what's with that. But anyways, but if it can only work with PC, let's say, then it's a different story about what games can carry what. Because we, as PC gamers would know, games can exceed the 60 frames a second gap that's usually on consoles to 120 frames to 90 frames a second. So 90 frames a second isn't necessarily something that's a stranger to PC gaming. This is something that's regular to them. But the only thing is, it's not the best frame rate that it could be. And that's what I think might turn off PC gamers, because they'll look at this and say, we're paying full price for this, and we're not getting the full 120 frames a second that we should be getting. And, at that point, I'm not saying that they would go out there and buy a PS4 and a PSVR headset for it, but, that's why they wouldn't buy it. And I'm not saying they would, just buy a PS4, but I'm saying they wouldn't buy the Oculus for that reason. Now, could it be possible that I am wrong completely and this is a terrible theory I'm making up? It's very possible. And I am going to be making a video right after this one talking about how the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation VR it's like Sony's taking a huge risk. And I'll explain that very soon, but Sony is taking a very huge risk with it. And it has nothing to do with Oculus. It has nothing to do with any of that. But if you've seen the financial state that Sony is in, I know people are saying that their TV sales are getting better and their sales of their speakers and all that are getting better, and their microphones and their cameras. Yeah, that's great, but Sony's still in a lot of financial trouble. I've been looking at their stocks and all that. For the past 2 years, they've been in the negatives. All across the board, they've been in the negatives. The only thing that's really making the money is the PlayStation 4. And this is why, with the PlayStation VR, if they don't do it right, they could, fail with the VR, and that could hit them hard. And I'll talk about that in the other video. But anyways, this is what I'm just going to talk about. The Oculus Rift versus the PS4. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. If you think that you think that Oculus is going to be better and they're going to win this war of the headsets, or do you think that Sony is going to win the war of the headsets? Don't forget to rate, comment, favorite, and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. I really want to know what you guys think about it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.